Good afternoon. Just starting on Mali, wanted to let you know that the Secretary General spoke to President Idriss Déby of Chad yesterday afternoon to personally convey his condolences. As you know, 10 peacekeepers from Chad serving in the UN mission in Mali were killed and at least 25 injured yesterday following an attack against the mission's camp in Aguilok in Kidal. The UN mission says that the wounded peacekeepers are receiving medical attention, including 7 who have been evacuated to Dakar for further treatment. The Secretary General strongly condemned the attack. He called on the Malian authorities, as well as the signatory armed groups to the peace agreement, to spare no effort in identifying the perpetrators of the attack so they can be brought to justice as swiftly as possible. He added that such acts will not diminish the resolve of the UN to continue supporting the people and government of Mali in their efforts to build peace and stability in the country. The Secretary General also paid tribute to the dedication and courage of the men and women serving in the UN mission in Mali, often at great personal risk and sacrifice. On Syria, on Syria, we are gravely concerned by continued reports of civilian casualties due to ongoing hostilities and security incidents in several parts of the country. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that scores of civilians, including women and children, were reportedly killed and injured due to airstrikes in the Baghouz Fokani area, southeast of Deir ez-Zor. Also, airstrikes and shelling reportedly resulted in civilian casualties in western Idlib and in northern Hama governorates in recent days. Explosions in Idlib and close to Afrin city over the weekend also reportedly resulted in civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. We continue to strongly call upon all the parties to the conflict and those with influence over them to take all measures to ensure that civilians and civilian infrastructure are protected in line with obligations under international law. And our humanitarian colleagues in Somalia report that today the federal government of Somalia and aid agencies launched the 2019 Somalia Humanitarian Appeal Response Plan, which seeks more than $1 billion to provide life-saving assistance and livelihood to 3.4 million Somalis who are impacted by conflict, climatic shock, and displacement. Overall, an estimated 4.2 million people, one-third of the total population of Somalia, require humanitarian assistance and protection. The humanitarian coordinator for Somalia, Peter de Klerk, urged the international community to continue to provide early and sufficient humanitarian funding and called for substantial investments in resilience building and development solutions, critical to ultimately end need and to allow people to fend for themselves with dignity. And the World Health Organization said today that it is concerned over the potential impact that the fuel crisis in Gaza might have on the lives and health of patients whose treatment required uninterrupted supply of power. The Gaza's 14 public hospitals are increasingly jeopardized by electricity shortages and rapidly declining UN-coordinated fuel reserves required to run emergency generators during prolonged electricity cuts from the main grid. Current fuel reserves are expected to sustain critical hospital services for only a few more days, depending on the number of hours the electricity is available. And over the weekend, the UN Refugee Agency reported that some 170 people either died or went missing in 2 separate shipwrecks in the Mediterranean Sea. Some 53 people on the Alboran Sea, western Mediterranean, according to information from NGO sources, while the Italian Navy reported an additional shipwreck in the central Mediterranean in which 117 out of 120 people who departed Libya were reported dead or missing. We cannot turn a blind eye to the high number of people dying on Europe's doorstep, said the High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. UNICEF is also calling for better protection for refugee and migrant children arriving in Europe. And in a statement issued today, they urge European governments to agree to a region-wide approach to better protect these children who continue to face grave dangers and violations of their basic human rights. Back here in New York, the Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, presented the gender parity strategy for uniformed personnel that he did so to member states. The strategy outlines common approaches for creating an enabling environment, as well as initiatives to improve communications and outreach. Mr. Lacroix also outlined the targets for deployment of military, police, justice, and corrections female personnel for this year. He said that despite efforts which led to a slight increase in deployed women over the last year, currently the overall number of women deployed to peace operation stands at a critically low figure of 5%. He appealed to member states to continue to strive to meet the targets outlined in the strategy, not only through pledges, but more importantly through sustained recruitment, training, and deployment of qualified women within national services. And the government of Kenya and the UN Population Fund have announced today an upcoming high-level conference on population development, the Nairobi Summit on the ICPD 25, Accelerating the Promise, will be held in Kenya from the 13th to the 15th of November. 2019 marks the 25th anniversary of the groundbreaking International Conference on Population Development that was held in Egypt, in Cairo. And you'll see over the weekend we issued a personal note to correspondence on behalf of the Secretary General's personal envoy, Matthew Nimitz. He said that on the 16th of January, the government of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia formally delivered to the government of Greece a note verbal and related which states that it has completed the necessary internal legal procedures for the entry into force of the agreement in accordance with its constitution. Upon notification by the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, the completion of the related constitutional amendments and its internal legal procedures for the entry into force of the agreement, considerations subsequently proceeding with the ratification of the agreement by Greece through its national processes would be in conformity with the relevant provisions of the agreement. And we also issued a statement on Saturday in which the Secretary General expressed his condolences and solidarity with the people and government of Mexico following the deadly explosion of an oil pipeline on Friday of Hidalgo State. The UN system in Mexico stands ready to offer assistance to national authorities, and we are now in 18 countries on our honor roll for 2019. The three new inductees are Armenia, Luxembourg, and Switzerland, and we thank them. Halas. Edie.
Thank you, Stéphane. Do you have any details on Martin Griffiths' current visit to Sana?
No, what I can tell you is that his efforts are continuing, and our colleagues on the ground in Hodeidah are working to convene the next redeployment coordination committee meeting as a face-to-face encounter. Their efforts will also take them to Sana and Riyadh on the coming days, and we hope to have more resulting, including regarding the situation with the Red Sea mills, which are so critical to our efforts, humanitarian efforts. Why not?
Stéphane, has the Secretary General congratulated Felix Tshisekedi on his victory being confirmed by the Constitutional Court?
No, there's been no contact. I think as per past practice, there will likely be a letter that will go out after the inauguration. Thank you. After the inauguration. Yeah. Thank you. Well, then, we've got most of the afternoon.
On Myanmar, the Security Council met last week and discussed the situation, and the agreement was to wait until the special envoy returns from her visit. Do you have details of when that might take place and who she'll be meeting, or has that happened already?
No, I need to get you an update on that. Yep.
Thank you. What's your position about Israel attack to Syria recently?
What I can tell you from our colleagues in the Golan Heights and UNDOF, first of all, that we're obviously aware of the recent reports of the increased air activity over the UNDOF's area of operation. The head of mission and force commander of UNDOF has been liaising with both the Israeli Defense Forces and Syrian authorities to de-escalate the situation. Such events demonstrate the volatility of the area and risk jeopardizing the long-standing ceasefire between the two countries. It is critical that both parties to the 1974 disengagement agreement respect the agreement at all times to prevent escalation across the ceasefire line and actions that undermine progress towards